after the election in the United States, Russia's President Vladimir Putin says he is ready to discuss Ukraine with Donald Trump. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that doesn't mean Putin is willing to change his demands, though. He also refused to confirm whether North Korean troops are currently fighting against Ukraine. At the EU summit in Budapest, Trump's staunchest supporter in the EU, Hungarian President Viktor Orbán, predicted the Trump administration would stop providing support to Kyiv in its fight against Russia. That is one of the reasons the U.S. election results were followed so closely across Eastern Europe. Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya is the leader of the opposition in Belarus, where she, in 2020, ran against authoritarian leader Alexander Lukashenko. She now lives in self-imposed exile in Lithuania and joins us today here in the studio. Ms. Tsikhanouskaya, thank you so much for coming into the studio and joining us here on DW. Now, the current U.S. president was very clear in his support for the Belarusian people's fight for democracy and human rights. What do you expect from a second Donald Trump term?
You know, I remember how in 2020 under his administration, the first sanctions were imposed against Lukashenko's regime after the power has been seized by him. And look, now I congratulated Donald Trump with his presidency because we had to respect choice of the American people. You know, it's such a luxury, you know, not to know who will be your next president, because in Belarus it's like sterile non-elections. So, and of course, we as Democratic Forces, we will have to work with the new administration. We have heard many declarations during his pre-election campaign, but now we have to see what actions will be. But I want to believe that American people who influence actually the policy of the president, because they are power in the country, they will stand strongly for democracy. They will stand with those who fight for democratic changes, and they will conduct principled and values-based policy, but not business or interest-based policy.
Yeah. I want to quote your message of congratulation to Donald Trump. You said you want to continue and enhance our cooperation with the U.S. to bring freedom to Belarus. What do you hope that cooperation will look like?
You know, for these 4 years, since 2020, we have been enjoying bipartisan support from the USA. So what we need from the USA is support to Belarusian Democratic Forces. It's pressure on Lukashenko's regime, because it's a dictator, and, you know, one of the tasks of democratic world is to fight with dictators. So sanctions for human rights abuses, for tortures in Belarus, and assistance to people, and also bringing perpetrators to accountability. So these are directions we are working on. And of course, you know, treating Belarusians who had to flee Belarus because of repressions, you know, honestly, providing them with refugee when it's necessary.
Now, Alexander Lukashenko has responded to the results in the United States with flattery. He called Donald Trump a powerhouse and a bulldozer, and even suggested he would recommend him for a Nobel Peace Prize if he brought the war in Ukraine to an end. How concerned are you about this kind of praise maybe winning Donald Trump over, you know, getting him on his side?
I'm not even sure that Donald Trump, you know, himself knows about the situation in Belarus at the moment. It's like a gray zone for him. Maybe he doesn't remember who is Lukashenko at all. So, of course, you know, Lukashenko wants to show that Donald Trump, you know, will be on the side of dictators. Hopefully, he will not be. But, you know, in advance, he decided, you know, to you know, send such a pleasant message. But still, I want to say that I really believe in American people who will not. The USA is democracy. It's not the one person, it's not a dictator, you know, who is conducting foreign policy. It's people, and people supporting Belarus, people of the USA supporting Ukraine, and they hopefully will not stop assistance to Ukrainians.
Let's look at the situation in Ukraine, because Donald Trump has run on a platform saying that he would end the war in Ukraine in a matter of 24 hours after he returned to office. It's widely believed that that would be a peace on Russia's terms, at least partially. What would that mean for the region?
It's very important for all democratic world, including the USA, to provide everything possible for Ukrainians, for them to win the war. for them to be winners of this fight, because it's not just, Ukrainians are not just fighting for their territory. It's not like a local war. It's fight against dictatorship. And if democratic world, democratic leaders will show their weakness, or they will show that they can make deals with the terrorists, with the tyrants, so what will be the response of the society, of democratic society? So now not only Belarus or Ukraine are under threat of dictatorship or authoritarianism, it's the whole world. So now dictators don't respect democracy, and democratic world has to show that we have teeth, we have instruments, to punish you and to show that we are strong. So now we are waiting from powerful leaders in the USA, in Germany, to show that dictators will not be appeased, dictators will be only fought.
Mm-hmm. If that doesn't happen, if peace in Ukraine happens on Russia's terms, do you think that will lead to Vladimir Putin being emboldened and maybe trying to grab more land, seize control in other parts of the region?
Absolutely. I think that, tyranny is like cancer. Until you cut the last cell of it, it will be broaden, its borders. And I'm always telling to our European friends, if not stop tyranny now, they will knock to your doors. What are you going to do then?
Is it, if we're looking at this war then maybe widening, or Vladimir Putin's aspirations growing, do you think that's a realistic prospect, given how the war has been conducted until now? Tens of thousands of soldiers have died. There is growing discontent within Russia as well about this conflict. Do you think there is a way that maybe also civil society in Russia would then say, okay, this is enough? Or is the propaganda machine such that Vladimir Putin can have his way either way?
Because it's up to Russian people to decide what they want in Russia. But now it's very important to help those who have consensus regarding democracy or autocracy. Because in Belarusian society, we want to return Belarus into Europe. We want democratic future for Belarus. The same about Ukrainians. So help those who know what they want. And believe me, changes in Belarus can spark changes in Russia. So don't underestimate the meaning of free, democratic and independent Belarus in this fight against global tyranny.
Now that you mentioned a free, democratic Belarus, there are elections scheduled in Belarus for next January. How big are your hopes for a possibility of change, even ever so slightly?
Look, I wouldn't use the word election regarding Belarus. It's imitation, it's farce, it's, ritual, circus, but not elections. Because in the country where all the alternative media are ruined, where civil society had to flee, the country, where people have to fight undergroundly because of the level of repressions, where all the political opponents are in prisons or in exile, it's like a political desert. And now it looks like Lukashenko is preparing for military operation, for like sterile event, but not for so-called elections. So this ritual will not change anything for Belarusians. It will not make Lukashenko legitimate again. It will not turn the page of our history. And of course, I encourage all the democratic countries, not recognize these elections. And I already feel this consensus about this issue. Nobody is going to say, okay, Lukashenko reappointed himself, so we'll return to business as usual. No, it will not happen.
You say it's going to be a sterile event. Do you just paint a picture for us? What is this election or pseudo-election going to look like?
People will be forced to come to polling stations, to make their choice. Nobody is going to count. People will count voices. They will just draw the number Lukashenko needs to draw, and that's it. And I don't think that people this time will go to the streets, to protect independence, because the level of repressions in Belarus is awful. You can't see rallies on the streets now. You can't see, vocal Belarusians, because every day in Belarus, 15, 20 people are being detained every day without weekends. And now we see how before so-called elections, this regime intensified repressions because they are afraid of people. They still behave as if hundreds of thousands are standing in front of Lukashenko's palace. Lukashenko feels very fragile. And, even having such a sterile situation at the moment, they still detain people because they're afraid.
Yeah. It is precisely that repression that forced you into exile. Can you explain what your work in Lithuania looks like now?
For 4 years, we managed to keep unity of democratic forces. We managed to keep connection between those who fled the country, and it's 500,000 of people, and those who in Belarus. We in constant communication and coordination with underground movement in the country. They are providing us necessary information how regime is circumventing sanctions, or how Belarusian enterprises helping Russian war. They are buying microchips, doing different military stuff, and on the basis of this information, the USA and the European Union imposing sanctions on Lukashenko's regime. Also, we build alternative institutions of power. It's so important that people know how we are organized. Also, we formalized relationship with the democratic world. We have strategic dialogue with the USA. We are now part of the Council of Europe. We have wonderful relationship with governments of democratic countries, and they don't recognize Lukashenko's regime. They recognize us as representatives of Belarusian people. So we strengthen an agency of democratic forces. And we are working with diaspora that play a huge role. We are working with different NGOs and civil society of different countries. We managed to rediscover Belarus for democratic world, and we managed to explain why it's so important to distinguish between Lukashenko's regime and Belarusian people, punish regime, support people, give more assistance to media, more assistance to civil society, because we need energy to continue. It's really very exhausting fight against brutal dictatorship, and Eastern Berlin needed Western Berliners. Now we need this assistance from Germany, from all the European Union, just to keep our fight going on.
Yeah. You're living in exile. Not everybody could leave. Your husband is in prison. Maria Kolesnikova is also in prison. So are many other political opponents to Lukashenko. Do you know how your husband, you have a picture of him there with you, do you know how he's doing? Do you know how Maria is doing?
So first of all, I want to remind that at the moment, more than 1,400 political prisoners in Belarus, and this number is growing every day. Many of political prisoners are kept incommunicado. It's a new word for us. It's when a person is kept in full isolation. I don't know about my husband for 600 days already. No news. The same about Maria Kolesnikova, who has special connection with Germany. Lukashenko's regime wants to persuade our beloved, our friends behind the bars that the world has forgotten about you. Nobody cares. Your sacrifice was in vain. And it's so, difficult not to know if your husband is alive. But we have to continue this fight. We have no choice. But in this fight, we need allies. We will not be able to win alone, the same as Ukrainians need the whole support of democratic world, because we are important for stability, for security of the whole region. So it's obligation of every powerful country to be with us on this difficult path.
Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, the leader of the Belarusian opposition and powerful voice for democracy and human rights in the country. Thank you so much for taking the time today, and all the best to you.